The power of the small move. If the hidden self is the source, and the open doors are the entry points, then the mind is where the battle becomes visible. It is here, quietly, repeatedly, that defeat or victory begins. There is a common misunderstanding about spiritual strength. Many imagine it as a constant state of intensity, a person who wakes each morning with clarity, discipline, and unwavering focus. But lived experience tells a different story. There are days, sometimes many in a row, when the mind feels heavy, clouded, and resistant to even the simplest action. Psychology names this state depression. Spiritual life recognizes it as something more than emotion. During such moments, the body becomes still, but not in peace. The mind fills with resistance. Stay in bed. There is no point. You cannot do this today. The smallest responsibilities begin to feel overwhelming. Hygiene, work, even prayer, things that once felt natural, become burdens. In my own experience, these moments were some of the most difficult. During the early stages of my struggle, particularly around 2016 when my marriage was under severe strain, there were mornings when I felt completely immobilized. It was a kind of internal paralysis. The thought of facing the day felt heavier than the day itself. At that time, I believed that overcoming such a state required a dramatic breakthrough, a surge of strength, a sudden release. But what I discovered was something far more practical, and far more powerful. Victory began with something small. There were days when the only thing I could do was force myself out of bed because I refused to agree with the voice that told me I could not. Then came the next step, taking a shower, then dressing, then eating something simple and nourishing. Each of these actions seemed insignificant in isolation. But together, they created a shift. When I remained in bed, the thought I cannot face this day felt true. But once I was dressed, that thought lost its authority. Reality had already begun to contradict it. This is the quiet but profound principle. Action reshapes thought. The mind often presents itself as the leader, but in many cases, it follows the body. This is where both psychology and spiritual wisdom converge. In psychological terms, this is behavioral activation, the idea that action can interrupt negative mental cycles. In spiritual terms, it is obedience in weakness, the refusal to surrender to internal resistance. Scripture captures this dynamic in a simple but powerful way. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. James 4 verse 7. Resistance is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is simply getting up. The shadow in the mind. This is also where the shadow operates most effectively. It does not always appear as obvious negativity. It often disguises itself as reasonable delay, justified avoidance, quiet discouragement. It tells you, rest a little longer. You are not ready yet. You will try tomorrow. But over time, these small agreements accumulate and shape a life of stagnation. To confront the shadow at this level is to act against it consistently. As I learned to move even when I felt unable, something changed in my sense of agency. I began to see that I was not as powerless as I had believed. Even in weakness, I had a choice. As they say, if you cannot fly, run. If you cannot run, walk. If you cannot walk, roll, but you must keep moving. This is not motivational language. It is survival. Breaking the mental prison. Overthinking is one of the primary ways the mind becomes trapped. The imagination begins to build scenarios. Worst-case outcomes. Imagined rejection. Anticipated failure. And the person begins to live inside those imagined realities. But physical action interrupts this process. When you move, you shift your position in reality. You prove through experience that the thoughts are not absolute. Over time, these small victories accumulate into something greater, evidence-based confidence, not emotion. Spiritual discipline and daily structure. What began as survival gradually became structure. I realized that maintaining clarity required consistency, not only spiritually, but physically and mentally. A day anchored in integration began to take shape. Morning prayer, not as obligation, but as orientation. Light physical movement, to activate the body. Intentional work, to ground the mind in purpose. Evening reflection, to bring awareness and correction. This was not a rigid system, but a framework of stability.